Happy Friday. Welcome to my channel where I talk about whatever's on my mind. And today what's on my mind is DNA testing. Ancestry.com and 23andme have been out for a pretty long time. I've actually had Ancestry.com since 2009, but I think I didn't do my testing until a couple years after that. And it looks completely different than it does now. But I just wanted to compare the two because I recently did my 23andme after years of saying that I wasn't going to do it with them, but here I am. I kind of wanted to compare and contrast the two because they both are good just for different reasons. But first, I probably should explain how DNA testing works. DNA testing for Ancestry is really confusing and kind of way above my knowledge bank, but what we do know is that human DNA is pretty much identical from person to person. The differences in what's in the DNA is the variants, or as previously known, genetic mutations. Some genetic mutations you get are biological, and some other genetic mutations just happen throughout a person's lifetime. The genetic mutations that are from your parents, you pass them on to your children as well. But the genetic mutations that you get during your lifetime due to your lifestyle or exposure to chemicals or the environment, they don't get passed on to your children. So when genetic testing is done, what they do is they separate the strands and they take those single strands and put them into what's called a microarray. Probably I'm pronouncing that correctly, but the microarray has samples of a DNA with certain variants input into it some way, and then they put your DNA on there as well, and whatever variants it's attracted to, it means that those variants are in your genes, and certain variants are associated with certain ethnicities and regions of the world. It is important to say though that some variants are present in all ethnicities, and it can be really hard to differentiate what variants are exclusive to one ethnicity or race. Ancestry.com has a huge reference panel. It's one of the first well-known DNA testing kits for ethnicity/race in the world. Because of this, that means that the funding that they have to be able to go into these countries and take DNA from people that they believe have known relatives from that region that go back a whole bunch of generations is better than the funding that's available for newer ancestry related businesses like 23andme and MyHeritage DNA. Ancestry.com has about 116,000 reference samples. Now, I was only able to find this in samples. This means that they could have 500 samples from the Dominican Republic and 5,000 samples from the United States. We don't know, at least I couldn't find specifically how it broke down by country. And then for 23andme, they have 14,000 people in their reference panel. So they took the DNA of 14,000 people. Now, I also don't know what the breakdown of that is, like how many people from how many countries or anything like that. Something else to note is that your account will constantly update with new DNA data and new DNA research, which means your percentages are going to change. In the beginning of me having my account with Ancestry DNA, it looked completely different as far as what countries they believed my genetics look most like. That's important to remember. It's not going to tell you with 100% certainty that your ancestors were from this specific country. There's just no way for them to be able to know. It just says, what does your DNA look most like? Okay, let's start with Ancestry.com. Their rates start at $99 for basic Ancestry DNA plus World Explorer, which means the genealogy aspect of it, is $100. And then the DNA test plus all access to be able to thoroughly look into your genealogy is $199. I hate when they do that like $99 thing, because just say $100. The basic and the basic plus World Explorer are basically the same price. They're $100. The difference is that the World Explorer requires a membership. So you're going to be paying every single year to be able to access your genealogy aspect of it. Ancestry.com, just like the name, basically focuses only on your ethnicity/race and where you came from. They don't really, as far as I know, as far as I can see right now in 2025, they don't really focus on trait science. And it's really hard to do traits anyway, because there's so many reasons for why people are the way that they are. It's really hard to tie it down to just genetics or specific genes. Now, these are the current breakdowns of my ancestry in Ancestry.com. 26% Spain, 23% Portugal, 10% Senegal, 7% Indigenous Haiti and Dominican Republic, 6% Benin and Togo, 6% Western Bantu peoples, 5% Ivory Coast and Ghana, 5% Nigeria, 3% Central West Africa, 3% Basque, 2% Cameroon, 1% Mali, 1% Southern Bantu peoples, 1% Northern Africa, and 1% France. Now that breaks down by continent to 53% Europe, 40% Africa, and 7% Indigenous, which is not a continent, but it's the best way that they can separate it. Now that makes a lot of sense, given that I'm Dominican and Dominicans have a lot of mixed ancestry. And this is why it's really hard for Dominicans to identify with one race. We just identify with being Dominican because we all look differently, but we all have around the same heritage. I don't think anyone who looks at me would be like, oh yeah, she for sure is almost 50% of African descent. Now let's do 23andMe. 23andMe pricing is $99 for just the basic stuff, ancestry related. Then you have Ancestry Plus Health, which is $199 or $200. Then you have Premium, which is $199 per year, or per the first year, and then $69 per year after that. And then you have the Total Health, which is like you really want to know about yourself. $999 the first year and $499 per year after, because you have to have a membership. It's super expensive. Even when you include the offers for Black Friday, like at Black Friday, I noticed that Ancestry was offering DNA kits for the basic package at $57 or $67. And 23andMe was offering it, I think, only a couple of dollars less than $99 for the basic package. Even when you factor that in, it's actually pretty expensive, especially if you're wanting to know so much more information than the basic and the premium offers. Like $500 for a DNA kit is a lot, but I do also think that genetic testing in general is super expensive, so it might be worth it for some people. 23andMe does offer a lot more information though. They focus a lot on traits, and as well as they focus on disease management or prevention, I should say, because they give you the probability of you developing certain diseases. Obviously they can't with 100% certainty tell you that, but it's been pretty accurate as far as what I've seen of what it says I could develop and what I've already developed in my life. They also include Neanderthal DNA in there and your ancestors, famous ancestors from your DNA. I don't know how I feel about that, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, so moving on to the 23andMe, the ancestry composition, we have 53% or 53.6% European, mostly Spanish and Portuguese. Sub-Saharan African, 39.1%. The countries with the top percentages are Senegambian and Ghanaian, as well as Nigerian. It's just, the confidence level is that it's mostly West African. Indigenous American, 4.5%, specifically Dominican Republic Indigenous. And then the rest is unassigned or stuff that they're not very confident about, which includes Western Asia and North African, which there's no way I have that as part of my heritage, but whatever. Something super controversial in there though. If I were to scroll down and look at ancestry regions, it puts me in the category of Afro-Dominican or African diaspora, which is really controversial if you live in the US, because again, I don't look anything like it. Yeah, Yeah, it's pretty cool. I like this more. This used to be how Ancestry.com used to separate their stuff. They would give you the percentage per continent first, and then they would break down countries after that. It's pretty close to the numbers that I got for Ancestry.com, so I would think it's maybe accurate. And also, but I will note though that 23andMe, unlike Ancestry.com, makes you answer a whole bunch of questions before like you sign up. Like while you're signing up, it makes you answer a whole bunch of questions, which gives them a hint as to like what your heritage is. Are you just guessing based on where I told you that I'm from? Because Ancestry.com doesn't make you do that. It just makes you give them your DNA, your money, and then you're done. In 2 weeks after your saliva specimen is received, you get your results. I did do the Ancestry Plus Health, so I do have some health predisposition available for me to look at. I'll give you a list of all the ones that it looks for, because when you sign up, before you sign up for it, it doesn't tell you what it's going to tell you. It gives you some examples, but it doesn't tell you all of them. So I'll tell you what you would get health predisposition wise without the premium. I also, after I got my results, I ended up getting premium because there were some disorders or diseases that I wanted to look at that would have been interesting. But yeah. Okay, so these are the ones that are not in the premium, just in the health category. Age-related macular degeneration, hereditary thrombophilia, late onset Alzheimer's disease, type 2 diabetes, alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, breast cancer, BRCA1, BRCA2, selected variants of those genes, celiac disease, chronic kidney disease, colorectal cancer, familial hypercholesterolemia, G6PD deficiency, hereditary amyloidosis, hereditary hemochromatosis, Parkinson's disease, and that's it. When you add the premium has gestational diabetes, high blood pressure, kidney stones, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, polycystic ovary syndrome, severe acne, triglycerides, anxiety, asthma, atrial fibrillation, ADHD, bipolar disorder, breast cancer, PRS report, which is, I guess, is a more detailed report, the colorectal cancer, PRS report, coronary artery disease, depression, diverticulitis, eczema, fibromyalgia, gallstones, glaucoma, gout, HDL cholesterol, Hashimoto's disease, hereditary prostate cancer, insomnia, irritable bowel syndrome, LDL cholesterol, lupus, migraine, obstructive sleep apnea, panic attacks, preeclampsia, psoriasis, restless leg syndromes, rosacea, skin cancer, uterine fibroids. It also gives you carrier status on disorders like familial Mediterranean fever, RSACs, agenesis of the corpus callosum with peripheral neuropathy, so specific, autosomal recessive polycystic kidney disease, beta thalassemia and related, Bloom syndrome, Canavan disease, congenital disorder of glycosylation type 1A, cystic fibrosis, D bifunctional protein disease, just a whole bunch of rare disorders, to be honest. Pompe disease is a good one to mention because it's not that rare. Sickle cell anemia, Tay-Sachs disease. Okay, I'm going to click on the ones that said I had an increased likelihood. Gestational diabetes. It says an estimated 13% of people with genetics like mine develop gestational diabetes during pregnancy. This result takes into account your birth sex and genetic ancestry. I'm a little bit outside the typical range, but not that bad. Now, high blood pressure killed me because it says an estimated 98% of people with genetics like yours develop high blood pressure by their 70s. I have a 98% chance of getting high blood pressure at some point. The typical range is still high for that one because it just increases with age, your likelihood of getting high blood pressure. But I was diagnosed with high blood pressure at 15. which I think is because of my anxiety. Because the doctors did a whole bunch of tests to see if my kidneys were failing or something, but they were not. I just had high blood pressure, and I still do. I'm Lodipine gang. All right. Kidney stones. I've had kidney stones already. Increased likelihood, 11% develop kidney stones by their 70s. It's within the normal range, but it was accurate. What else? I have an increased likelihood for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. 55% of people with genetics like mine develop the disease by their 60s. I'm well outside the typical range, so that was interesting to me. Can't eat any fats. Type 2 diabetes also killed me because diabetes runs in my family on both sides. It says I had a 77% chance of developing type 2 diabetes between the ages of 29, which is my current age, and 80. I'm well outside the typical range. Type 2 diabetes is one of those things where you also have more of a chance of getting it as you age, but it's not necessarily like something you're guaranteed to have so much as high blood pressure. I'm well outside of the typical, my alarm's going off. I'm well outside of the typical range. Grandma had diabetes. My sister has gestational diabetes that later on developed into plain old type 2 diabetes. I have pre-diabetes. Okay, carrier status is pretty important for people that want to have kids because you can compare with the person you're going to have kids with and see if you could give them one of these disorders. I think I only had one variant. I'm not going to have kids, but I think I only had one variant detected, and it was familial Mediterranean fever. I've never heard about this until now. But it is interesting. Familial Mediterranean fever is a genetic disorder. It is characterized by recurrent short episodes of fever, as well as inflammation in the abdomen, chest, and joints. In some cases, there may be abnormal protein buildup in the kidneys. People with FMF most often have two variants in the MEFV gene. I have one variant of the ones that they tested. Also interesting, the test is most relevant for people with Arab, Armenian, Sephardic, Jewish, and Turkish descent. Okay, here's some of the traits that they test on that are just like quirky things for you to know that could be or could not be true. Alcohol flush reaction, caffeine consumption, cat allergy, deep sleep, dog allergy, emotional eating, genetic weight. I'm not going to read all of them. Let me just tell you which ones were accurate and inaccurate, which surprised me. Muscle compositions, it says that my muscle composition is common in elite power athletes, which like Ancestry.com said something similar too about me being good for like sprinting. Yeah, but I despise exercise, so that's never gonna happen. One that surprised me was misophonia because I do freaking have it, and it said average odds of hating chewing sounds. It's interesting that there's no genetic component as to why I have it. It's just me. So yeah, I hope this helps anybody considering doing 23andme or Ancestry.com. I think Ancestry.com is the best if you really want to dig into your genealogy. And I think 23andme is good if you really want to get into your health status, if you think you might have carrier status for something that is on the list, or you think you might be more likely to get a certain disorder and you really want to know for sure. It is cheaper than doing traditional genetic testing, which can be really expensive. So that is the end of the video. Like, comment, subscribe if you want to see more of me in the future. Bye.